From Cybersheet Services International. I'm here with Carl Herberger, Vice President of Security Services, and obviously we have a lot to talk about this week. We had the new interim DFARS rule, Carl. Big change, faster than we thought, really, because what we had thought was November. So what's your reaction?
Well, I think it was an amazing amount of data to go through, and I'm actually pretty impressed, to be honest with you. Getting this out before the fiscal year ends and giving us 60 days to review it, also to respond to it, is pretty impressive for a government timeline to be met. The 60 days, though, is a short period of time, don't you think, Eric? 60 days to be able to actually upload. How are you doing against this new scoring system? How do you?
Yeah, I think that's the thing that really is kind of the sleeper in the interim rule, right? Everyone was focused on CMMC, but one of the things this rule said is, look, in 60 days, every new contract, work order, task order, change order, everything with the Department of Defense is going to require contractors to have a current assessment using the DoD assessment methodology, which calculates a score. You need to have that now. It's your hunting license, right? To go forward, and it has to be uploaded into the Supplier Performance Risk Management System, SPRS.
Yeah.
I think that was a huge surprise, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on
most
companies, right? Most companies, I think, are in this position. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
I know we're both former military guys, right? And it reminds me of when somebody asks you to show them your DD-214 or something like that, right? So that you can get a discount at Lowe's or something. Yeah. And you have to go figure out, how do I get into that system and go download my DD-214? But it's something like this. And, you know, they said that everybody has to do this basic review and upload it, but that the government may come back and then later do an assessment on you for a higher level review, a medium and a high level review. And in the rule, they kind of give you some ideas of what that means, with the high being you're a high sensitivity kind of customer to the government, and they're going to use more refined objective evidence in essentially assessing you. And that you had to have done it in the last 3 years, your assessment and so forth. So those are all curious to me. You know, I know that 3 years in IT security is like, it might as well be dog years, right? It might as well have been back when 8 is Enough was still playing on the TV system or something like that, right? So I think to myself, if I'm recommending to a company how to think about this, I would say brush up your assessment if you've just done it within the last year. If you've not done it in the last year, I would say get to it. And then
I think even more urgently than that, Carl, I think you're right. You got to brush up, you got to get an updated assessment, but I've not seen anybody, except for someone who's going through an actual customer DoD audit, you know, a DIBCAC or DCMA or you know, one of the components of DoD. I've not seen anybody do an assessment using the assessment methodology and calculating scores. So even if you have an assessment, you need an assessment using this methodology, and there is a distinction there. Now you can back into the scores, but you're posting this in a database that other DoD components are going to have access to potentially evaluate you as a vendor. So it's almost like everybody needs to do an updated assessment using this methodology.
Yeah, it's very true. I know that we have experience because we have watched auditors, right, DCMA and Navy, Air and Sea and so forth, go through this process. So we have sort of over-the-shouldered the process already. But I think that there's going to be a learning curve here whatsoever, yeah, for sure. And let me ask you your opinion on this, Eric. 800-171 is what you're measuring against. Do you believe it's clear that it's version 1 or version 2, or they say version A and so forth? What's your opinions on that?
Well, I think it is clear. So I mean, there's and this is the problem for customers, right? So they're bombarded with 800-171, 800-172, version 1A, the assessment methodology. So I think 800-171-V1, it's clear. That's what we're talking about. But I think the challenge for anybody who's running a business that's not cybersecurity services, frankly, where do I start? Like, first of all, I don't want to learn all this stuff. You guys are killing me with all these new acronyms, these things I have to do, the fear, uncertainty, a doubt, the vendor marketing. So I think it's very hard. And you mentioned something about our experience with the DFARS audits. And so we've got a webinar out there. I'm not sure if it's on our YouTube channel. You can get to it through our website at cybersheet.com, but it talks to the case study for one of those audits we've been through. So I think that was important, Carl, because we talked to a little bit of what that audit was like and what the process was like. And what I'm wondering is if customers or DoD component or DoD Defense Industrial Base contractors will do the assessment and then stop there, because it's not clear to me that you really have to implement anything. It's encouraged, but I don't see the forcing mechanism.
Yeah, it's so this DFARS release was super interesting to me, because I think you sort of had the left side of the mouth and you had the right side of the mouth, I think, in this most recent release, right? Because they brought into law this long-range roadmap, this sunrise of CMMC, right? At the same time, they sort of set in place a sunset 5 years for the current DFARS 7012, where you'll have a changeover 5 years down the road over to the CMMC process. But the feeling is that this CMMC, which is a maturity process, and the DFARS, which is everybody, everywhere, no matter what size company, no matter who you are, you do it this way process, it feels like there's two things that are going on, right?
Yeah.
At the same time. And what I struggle with out of the release is if you're prepared for 800-171, it sounds to me like a lot of people have to get there very quickly if they're not already. What should be done at the same time so that you're not creating more work with CMMC, if anything?
I think that's an important way to look at it, because I view NIST 800-171, and really always have, as the on-ramp to CMMC, right? So if you're trying to get on that highway, there's an on-ramp to get there that kind of eases you onto it, right? You don't just go from 0 to 60. And that's what NIST 800-171 is, because it allows you to step into the controls, 110 security requirements. It's the foundation of CMMC level 3. It gets you to 85% compliance with CMMC level 3. So I think you do them in parallel. And now where the government, again, I give Katie Arrington and the DoD a lot of credit for what they've done. This is light years where we were, especially in the time that it's been done. I mean, I've been involved with the DIB CSI effort since 2008, and it took from 2008 to 2015 to get a DFARS rule. Katie Arrington's done it in about a year and a half. I mean, it's pretty incredible. Yeah. So they've laid a marker down with this rule. They said CMMC will be in every single contract as of potentially sooner, but no later than October 1, 2025. So it gives you a great on-ramp to kind of move your way into that maturity. Do NIST 800-171 now, because if you don't, you're going to be putting into this SPRS database and have a very poor showing. What will be the impacts of that? I don't know, but I think that's what I take away from it.
Very interesting. So Eric, I know both CMMC and this NIST upload to the SPRS system, both will require you to have submittals into the government that will stay as a matter of record with the government. That spawns like 4 or 5 different kinds of questions that I'd just love to get your opinion on. The first is, to what degree do you believe that this is discoverable, or information that through, I don't know, maybe a FOIA, a Freedom of Information request that comes out or something? Do you think that this information is then part of somehow a public record?
I think that's a great question. It's one for lawyers or one of our partners, because I think it's a legal question. And without going too far into the answer, I think the risk, anyway, I don't know the answer to the question, but the risk is certainly I'm performing on current contracts that I've self-attested to by virtue of winning the contract and performing on the contract, but I've never actually made any investments or exercised any implementation of the 110 security requirements. Now, I'm going to submit an assessment, a basic assessment as required by this new interim rule. I would guess most customers are doing the assessment for the first time, certainly using the new methodology. If that assessment says you're not compliant, but historically you've won the contracts and said you were compliant, how do you reconcile the two? That's a lot of risk for a publicly traded company or a private company.
Yeah, this is something I think we really need to get some answers to. I'll tell you another one that really, for me, bubbles up to the reality of how the system works. It's so you've submitted, and at the time of your submittal, everything was correct and very black and white. And you go, they said the submittal will last 3 years, and you go, let's say a year or maybe a year and a half into your term of the submittal, and you have some sort of cyber attack, like a ransomware infection or a data breach, or maybe maybe an insider problem that you're aware of that led to a breach, or maybe a sub that caused a potential unusual opportunity for you. So how does this work in the system? Does it trigger a new assessment to be required? Do you automatically become disqualified out of the system? How do these breaches and cyber attacks and spills affect the assessment and the currency of the information?
You raise a great point, because certainly in that scenario, without a doubt, that would trigger the reporting requirement to the Defense Cybercrime Center. That's clearly written into DFARS Clause 7012. Most companies, in my experience, aren't set up to do that reporting, are not part of that mechanism, despite the clause being in their contracts. And then potentially, if it was severe enough, it would kick off the damage assessment management process, which is all well defined. It's been worked on for a long time. They've solved the legal, the technical issues around giving that private information to the government, and where forensics is required. So it's very interesting. It could potentially require a new assessment, but even before you get to that point, I think the majority of companies within the supply chain of a certain size aren't even set up to do the reporting when they have a breach. I don't know that they would know where they're supposed to go per the clause.
It's a great question, right? Like, I don't want to beat up any companies. None of us are like trying to be, I think, those kinds of people. But take Garmin, right? I think all of us are familiar with what happened with Garmin with a massive ransomware infection. And I think we all can either assume that Garmin is a huge contractor directly to the federal government, given the fact that they make all these automated flight control systems and so forth, or they're a sub to some of the biggest aerospace companies in the world, for certain, right, as part of the system. It would be interesting to see if these public disclosures lead automatically or will be automatically reviewed by the government to see what you do to your SPRS scores and so forth. I would think that all of this is correlated going forward. So my point, I guess, with all of this, and I love just your opinion on it, is that it feels to me that this is bigger than just a simple go upload your score into the system and wipe your hands and walk away, because I think that this has large tentacles for your future.
Without a doubt, we'll wrap it up here. I know we wanted to keep this a coffee talk in a little bit shorter, but that's a great point. It does have longer tentacles. I think if customers and primes and subs, or wherever you are in the supply chain, were to take the approach of this is a one and done check, I got my assessment, that is a high risk approach. It opens you up to False Claims Act. It opens you up to potential impacts relative to your competitiveness on future contracts. It opens you up to the fact that you've clearly been put on notice, CMMC's coming. You can't claim ignorance, right? You've now uploaded your assessment. Presumably you'll have some level of remediation around POEMs that you have to go deal with. Whether or not you do that, I mean, I think the data and the data the government's collecting, I think, will greatly. I mean, there was a lot of I think, chuckling at some of the cost estimates in the rule. But I think the data that the government's starting to collect will help refine and make those estimates more accurate. And I also think it was almost too cute by half, maybe, that how the government was calling out the cost. They essentially said in the rule, well, we know you've already implemented NIST 800-171 because you've self-attested to it. So the additional cost to get to CMMC is fairly negligible, when we all know most companies haven't implemented NIST 800-171.
It's so true. Now, I know, Eric, we got an upcoming CMMC event that's coming up in November, and we have some really powerful news that will come along about who will be attending. I believe we can get a lot of these questions answered there from people that will be attending that event, don't you think?
Yeah, that's right. It'll be a great event. We don't want to announce some of the people just yet, but we've got a tremendous lineup. You know, it's not going to be just another webinar. One of the unique things we're going to do there is we're going to do kind of a live use case. It's going to be, you know, a little longer, and it's going to take you through what's it look like an assessment, what kinds of questions, what are the artifacts, what are the types of evidence, and it's going to take you to, okay, I know this is an issue, multi-factor authentication. How do I go remediate that? Then take you through all the way through really our process, which is AIM, right? Assess, implement, manage. And so, yeah, I think that's going to be a great event for everyone in November. More details to follow. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Hope this was useful. Great to spend time with you.
Take care now. This will be first of many. Take care. Bye-bye.